What makes an unforgettable video game moment? Just like film and literature, games have the power to impact us on a profound emotional level. What we tend to remember of a game once the dust has settled are pivotal moments that have etched themselves into our collective memory. We might forget the details, but what stays is a sense of awe, fear, happiness, or sadness. In Moments of Genius, we will explore the techniques behind some of gaming's most memorable and iconic scenes in an attempt to better understand why they left such a tremendous impression on us. Moments of creative genius can be the result of music, writing, incredible technical achievements, or a perfect combination of all these things. Today's Moment of Genius is part of Sony Santa Monica's glorious return to the God of War series. There are plenty of breathtaking moments to talk about, but only one carries the entire weight of the God of War franchise. That is to say, the moment Kratos is forced to confront his past. Needless to say, spoilers are ahead. God of War had the courage to drastically reinvent itself, and as a consequence, the series has gained back relevance. The critical and commercial success exceeded all expectations. God of War has become one of the highest rated and fastest selling exclusives in PlayStation history. The game's continued success story directly contradicts the false narrative of companies like EA, claiming gamers simply aren't interested in great single-player experiences anymore. Well, God of War begs to differ. The reason for God of War's staggering success story is clear as day. Every aspect of the game received the utmost amount of polish and care. Whether it be the impactful narrative, satisfying combat system, or outstanding visual presentation. In spite of significant changes, the newest God of War title is a direct continuation of Kratos' story, which leads to the question how the game is addressing its own legacy. Despite featuring a staggering quality bar throughout the narrative, there's one unforgettable moment that elevates the game to something even greater. I truly believe that the return of the Blades of Chaos will be remembered for years to come. God of War is chock full of memorable and emotional moments, however, this one is the undisputable highlight. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In order to fully understand the individual parts that make this moment so brilliant, we have to identify the beginning. The emotional build-up for the Blades of Chaos moment begins 15 minutes earlier when Modi ambushes them in Tyr's vault. Atreus tries to save his father, and for an instant he's able to activate his Spartan rage, but due to the fact that he doesn't know how to control it yet, he falls into some sort of coma. Mimir and Freya believe that the reason for his sickness is a conflict of the mind. Because Atreus is a god, believing himself mortal, he suppresses his true nature. The first major thing I'd like to point out is how the developers decided to slowly build up suspense. The game begins to raise tension by creating a gloomy and unsettling atmosphere. Once you step outside Tyr's vault, the world has changed for the worse. All of a sudden, Midgard is shrouded in darkness, the sky is obscured by thick clouds, and it even looks like it's raining ash. One of the first associations that comes to mind is an environment after a volcanic eruption. Basically, the developers are attaching a symbolic meaning to a drastic change of weather and use it to represent and intensify the emotional state of the character. Now, in this case, it's not just a change in weather, but rather a supernatural reaction of the world to Loki's sickness. You can observe the same technique in a multitude of games and movies. To give you just a few examples off the top of my head, in Uncharted 4, there's a scene in which Nathan gets separated from his brother and finds himself stranded on an island. He is alone and completely exhausted. In order to hammer home Nathan's physical and mental isolation, Naughty Dog decided to place him in the midst of a tropical storm. Of course, the meaning of rain changes depending on the context of the story. For instance, at the end of Lion King, rain is used to symbolize a new beginning under the rule of Simba as the rightful king. The kingdom has been cleansed of Scar's tyranny and balance has been restored. I think you get the picture. Weather patterns are a frequently used technique to set the atmosphere of a scene or highlight a character's emotional condition. God of War's no exception. The dark weather paired with the ominous music in the background is a physical representation of his inner turmoil. Kratos is moving towards the epicenter of the Red Storm. He fears a confrontation with his past and is doing his best to prepare himself for the inevitable moment. The center of the storm is right above his home and the past he was trying to bury. It's definitely a simple and obvious tool to use, but it nonetheless has the desired effect. Something significant is about to happen, and the overall atmosphere does a great job to reinforce this feeling. Another aspect that makes this sequence so compelling is the sheer length of the build-up. When the design of the scene was still in its infancies, out of fear the player could get bored, many people inside the development team were against the long build-up and believed it would be best to let the player simply fast travel to the location. But thankfully, director Cory Barlog dismissed the idea of fast traveling and doubled down on slowly building up anticipation. In hindsight, postponing the moment as long as possible turned out to be a huge benefit. Without the long build-up, the impact of the Blades of Chaos scene would have been severely weakened. Keep in mind that for a suspenseful scene to work, we have to emphasize with the protagonist. The way this sequence is put together makes it easy to put yourself in the shoes of the character. It establishes a connection between the emotional state of Kratos and the player. The longer the scene goes on, the greater gets the feeling of anxiety, fear and uncertainty. We are forced to look at the unconscious body of Atreus as we make our way to Freya. Every second feels like an eternity given the circumstances. Once Kratos enters the elevator, you can clearly see how he's trying to suppress his emotions. For once, he encounters something he can't defeat with raw strength. His son is near death and there's nothing he can do about it. His godly power is useless. For the first time, we witness how Kratos is losing his stoic calm. He is moving left and right and has a hard time to not give in to panic. After you leave the elevator, you are not allowed to sprint, which seems like an unimportant detail. After all, you are only a couple of seconds away from reaching Freya's house. But at this point, I was already so invested in the characters that the slow walk of Kratos was enough to make me angry, if only for a split second. Apparently, the agitation from the player is desire to ramp up anxiety and tension. Again, the player is supposed to feel what Kratos feels. The anticipation increases even further when Kratos wants to dig up a past he swore would stay buried, and while he is saying this, he looks at his arms.
Then I must return home. Dig up a past I swore would stay buried.
Every half-decent God of War fan will have put one and one together. Of course, Kratos is referring to the Blades. And I would argue that it's a smart decision to make the return of the Blades so blatantly obvious minutes in advance. It is at this exact moment that the player's agitation and anxiety turn into pure excitement. Because you already know what's coming, you can cut the atmosphere during the boat ride with a knife. Yet again, the game establishes a direct connection between Kratos and the player. You are forced to endure the silence, and just like Kratos, the player is left alone with his own thoughts. Kratos is mentally preparing for the big moment, and so are you. By the way, it's a nice little touch that Kratos literally adopts the Greek thinker pose. The fact that the developers weren't afraid to embrace silence and take their time is an incredibly important element for the effectiveness of the entire sequence. The build-up takes around 15 minutes and the developers made sure that you really feel every single one. All of this is already quite impressive, but we have yet to touch on the two most integral elements. The way I see it, the Blades of Chaos moment is so impactful because it has a far-reaching influence on a narrative level and in terms of gameplay mechanics. Let's have a look at the gameplay component first. Shortly before Kratos gets his blades back, you are confronted with a bunch of Reavers, the only enemy type you are forced to fight during the 15-minute stretch leading up to the standout moment. If you don't remember what makes Reaver special, let me give you a quick reminder. Reavers and other types of Hellwalkers are undead warriors who are resistant to ice, making your frost axe completely useless. If you attack a Reaver with your axe, it simply bounces off, leaving the Reaver unharmed. Since your Leviathan axe is of no use, there's no truly effective way to crowd control a bunch of attacking Reavers. You have to finish them off one by one using your fists and shield. It's a slow and tedious process, and compared to other enemy types, it takes a lot of time to take out a group of Reavers. The key concept at play here is smart enemy placement. The deliberate placement of a certain enemy type in order to amplify the enjoyment of the player whenever he receives a new weapon is a tried and true video game formula. In fact, the old God of War games did this constantly. Here's just one example from God of War III. I'm sure you remember the Olympus Guardians. Olympus Guardians are skeleton soldiers carrying a shining blue shield. They can only be harmed once you shatter their shields, which makes this enemy type extremely annoying. That is, until you defeat Hercules and acquire a valuable new weapon, the Nemean Cestus, a pair of large metal gauntlets allowing you to shatter the shields of Olympus Guardians with ease. Because the game gives you a direct before and after comparison, receiving a new weapon or magical power feels incredibly satisfying. Before you acquire the gauntlets, and after you acquire the gauntlets.
Say hello to my little friend!
It's a simple technique, but the effect on the enjoyment of the gameplay experience can be massive. So, in true God of War fashion, the Blades of Chaos scene features the same before and after comparison. Before you acquire the blades, and after you acquired the blades. All of a sudden, a previously annoying and tedious enemy encounter turns into child's play. The blades open up new tactical options and crowd control becomes easier than ever. They managed to implement the same feeling of instant gratification that was so iconic in classic God of War titles. Not only that, the return of the blades is also perfectly placed in the great scheme of things. The Leviathan axe is a fantastic weapon. However, around the midpoint mark of the game, you are starting to notice that combat gets a little bit repetitive, and you wonder if that's it in terms of weapon variety. The second you are asking this question, the Blades of Chaos moment comes along and adds a completely new primary weapon to your repertoire. So not only is this moment great in and of itself, the timing is perfect within the overall gameplay experience as well. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be as objective and analytical as possible, but this moment is just pure gold. How can you not get goosebumps when the main theme of God of War kicks in as you butcher your way through hordes of enemies? Just like old times.
Let's see what the blade can do.
As great as all of this is, I think it's time to talk about the most essential element of the Blades of Chaos moment. Narratively, this moment is just beautifully crafted. It has a tremendous impact on the development of the character and represents a pivotal shift in the story, but it doesn't feel forced or like cheap pandering to fans. Kratos is gathering his mental strength in order to confront the thing he is most afraid of, which of course isn't the fact that he has to venture into hell. I mean, let's be real, escaping hell is skill Kratos perfected over the years. What he truly fears and hates is himself, or the man he once was. The one battle he was never able to win is the battle against his violent, vengeful nature. External monsters never were much of an obstacle for him. Regardless if we are talking about gods or titans, the enemy Kratos cannot defeat has yet to be invented. Kratos has always been his own worst enemy. It's clear that he fears to become the ghost of Sparta once more, which is why it makes perfect sense that his mind creates an illusion of Athena.
Athena. Get out of my head.
There she sits with her mocking smile reminding him of the despicable, hate-filled and self-righteous person he once was. She's an embodiment of his past mistakes. After all, she was one of the few allies Kratos had during his unrelenting quest for vengeance. But ultimately Kratos went too far even for her. Like so many, she fell victim to his uncontrolled rage as well.
If all on Olympus would deny me my vengeance, then all on Olympus will die. I have lived in the shadow of the gods for long enough.
So it's no wonder that Athena, of all people, is taunting him and keeps reminding him of all the horrible actions and deeds he has committed. For Atreus, Kratos is forced to take responsibility for his own failings and acknowledge the terrible crimes he has done. Because at this point, a direct confrontation with his past is the only thing that can save his son. This is why this moment is so impactful on a narrative level. The Blades of Chaos are the ultimate symbol of the past he was trying to bury and wanted to keep hidden. The blades are what started his servitude to the gods and the cycle of vengeance, chaos and destruction. These blades traumatized Kratos beyond belief. His selfish desire for power led to the deaths of countless innocents, including the brutal demise of his own family through his own hands. With his son on the brink of death, Kratos has to confront and accept the dark parts of his personality by finally being honest to himself. This is what he has to do in order to save Atreus and set a good example.
There's nowhere you can hide, Spartan. Put as much distance between you and the truth as you want. It changes nothing. Pretend to be everything you are not. Teacher, husband, father. But there is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
While I'm certain the scene also works for people who are not familiar with the previous games, it can only take full effect if you've been there from the start. It's the ultimate payoff for God of War veterans, a fix of pure nostalgia. The main reason why this moment is so impactful for people who know the story of Kratos and have played the old God of War titles is the fact that 7 games and over 13 years of history come crashing down at you in an instant. Once Bear McCreary's phenomenal soundtrack reaches its climax and you see the Blades of Chaos again after all those years, the emotional response is immense. This moment not only works within the constraints of this particular game, but encompasses the entire narrative pull of the franchise.
haunted by visions of his family. A family he himself murdered.
You can draw a comparison to the return to Shadow Moses in Metal Gear Solid 4, or the moment in Dark Souls 3 when you realize that you are back in Anor Londo. These magic moments function on the same principle. It's a skillful way to pay respect to your own legacy. What follows is a very subjective statement, but in order to put together this video, it's safe to say that I've watched the scene in its entirety at least 30 times, and I still get goosebumps during the pivotal moment, which goes to show how well crafted and designed this scene truly is.
You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
As you've seen, there are a lot of moving parts to this scene, and only when all of these parts are working together in perfect harmony, a truly impactful moment like the return of the Blades of Chaos can take full effect. The way in which Sony Santa Monica managed to combine dense atmosphere, a long suspenseful build-up, the satisfying addition of a new gameplay mechanic, and the narrative impact of the story makes this scene into a moment many of us won't forget anytime soon. And that's why the return of the Blades of Chaos is a moment of genius. Thank you so much for watching. As you may have noticed, the idea behind this video is to make moments of genius into a staple of my channel. There are plenty of other moments I'd like to feature in this series. Just take a look at the intro montage and you already know which moments I want to discuss in the future. Since this is a completely new series, please feel inclined to give me feedback in the comment section below. I'm still figuring out how to best structure these types of videos, so if you have any suggestions in regards to the structure and things that need fixing or improvement, I'm all ears. Obviously, the focus of this series will lie on games I've played myself, but if there are any magic moments you would like me to consider, just tell me. What are moments you will never forget? And most importantly, did you enjoy this video? Do you want me to continue this series? Yes or no? I'm grateful for any kind of feedback you guys can give me. Anyway, that's it for today. See you next time.